Good evening, everyone. We are not just one person. We carry a multitude of social identities, our nationalities, our professions, our teams, our generations. In any given moment, one of those identities can leap to the forefront, becoming psychologically salient, and suddenly the world looks different. But what actually happens when that switch flips? What are the consequences for how we see other people, for how we behave, and even for how we come to know ourselves? Tonight, we're going to explore two powerful ideas. First, the consequences of social identity salience, the profound shift in perception called depersonalization, the extreme state of identity fusion, and the forces that shape whether group behavior turns noble or destructive. Second, we'll step back even further and ask where the self itself comes from, drawing on the brilliant insights of the sociologist George Herbert Mead. We'll see that the self is not a private possession we build in solitude. It is a social construction, born and endlessly reshaped through interaction, and often built on a distorted mirror. Let's start with the consequences. Part 1. When the group takes over, consequences of social identity salience. When a social identity becomes salient, something radical happens. It's called depersonalization. Now, let me be clear, this does not mean you become a zombie or lose your personality in the clinical sense. It means something very specific. You stop seeing yourself and others as unique individuals with personal histories, quirks, and complexities. Instead, you see people, including yourself, as embodiments of the group prototype. You become interchangeable exemplars of a category. In extreme cases, this can deepen into identity fusion. Here, personal identity and social identity merge so completely that what happens to the group feels like it is happening directly to you. The boundary between me and we dissolves. And when that fusion is combined with a prototype that demands extreme action, people can be driven to behaviors they would never contemplate as isolated individuals. When an identity is salient, three things happen simultaneously. You think, feel, and behave in terms of the relevant prototype. Your thoughts are filtered through group norms, your emotions align with group interests, and your actions follow the script that the prototype prescribes. But here is the critical point. The nature of that behavior is not predetermined. Whether the group becomes a force for cruelty or for courage depends on three factors. First, the specific content of the prototype. What does it actually mean to be a good member of this group? Is the ideal member dominant or protective? Vengeful or forgiving? Second, beliefs about the group's status in society. Do members see themselves as high status or low status? As secure or under threat? As fairly treated or unjustly marginalized? And third, perceptions of intergroup relations. Is the relationship with the other group seen as competitive or cooperative? As a zero-sum conflict or a shared endeavor? To see all of this in action, let's leave the laboratory and step into a company that has just been taken over. Example, the acquired employees, the legacy team fights back. Imagine a respected family-owned company that has been making handcrafted furniture for 3 generations. The workers are skilled artisans who take immense pride in their craft. The owners know everyone by name. There's a sense of shared history and loyalty. Then, almost overnight, a large impersonal corporation buys the company. The original staff are told to adopt new procedures and report to new managers, outsiders who talk about efficiency, metrics, and cost-cutting. The old ways, they are told, are no longer profitable. What happens next is a textbook illustration of social identity salience and its consequences. Almost immediately, the longtime employees begin referring to themselves as the legacy team. This is not an official title. It emerges organically from the group itself. In meetings, they talk about what we used to do and what they are trying to erase. Productivity begins to drop. Not through loud strikes or open rebellion, but through a subtle, coordinated resistance. Workers collectively drag their feet on new policies. They rally around veteran team members who openly challenge the new leadership, treating those individuals as heroes. A quiet war has begun. Let's unpack what is happening here, layer by layer. First, depersonalization. Individual workers, a man who carves intricate chair legs, a woman who stains wood to perfection, a young apprentice who jokes with everyone, these distinct human beings now see themselves primarily as members of the acquired group. They are no longer Dave, Maria, and Jamal. They are the legacy team. Their diverse skills and personalities fade into the background. They perceive each other as interchangeable representatives of old-school quality and craftsmanship. At the same time, they see the new managers not as individuals, not as Mike, who is actually quite reasonable, or Susan, who privately loves handcrafted furniture, but as a faceless corporate machine. Any personal relationship that might have formed is overridden by the now salient us-them divide. Depersonalization has flattened the social landscape into two prototypes: us, the custodians of tradition, and them, the soulless suits. Second, thinking, feeling, and behaving per the prototype. The legacy team prototype contains a cluster of attributes: loyal, experienced, skilled, and, crucially, unfairly treated. Because their identity is salient, the employees feel a collective mixture of intense pride in the old ways and simmering resentment toward the new order. Their thoughts are filtered through this lens. Every new procedure is interpreted as an attack on their dignity, not as a rational business decision. And their behavior follows suit. They engage in coordinated non-cooperation, passive resistance, deliberate foot-dragging, mutual solidarity. This is not chaotic rebellion. It is exactly what a prototype of a betrayed but principled group would prescribe: stand together, resist quietly, and protect the old ways. They are behaving as model members of the legacy team. Third, the three factors shaping the nature of this behavior. Let's start with the content of the prototype. The legacy team prototype defines the group as skilled veterans who value craftsmanship over profit. This is crucial. If the prototype were different, say if it defined the group as hot-headed rebels who smash things, the behavior would be aggressive and destructive. But because the prototype is about principled, dignified defense of tradition, the resulting behavior is stubborn resistance, not violent uprising. The prototype writes the script. Next, beliefs about the group's status. Before the takeover, these workers saw themselves as high-status artisans, respected by owners and customers alike. Now they have been demoted, treated as redundant employees who need to be retrained by outsiders. This status loss is a wound. Collective drive to reassert worth is a direct consequence of that perceived fall. They are not simply resisting change, they are fighting to restore their group's wounded status. Finally, perceptions of intergroup relations. The legacy team perceives the new parent company as exploitative and disrespectful. They see the relationship as a classic zero-sum conflict. For the corporation to win, the legacy team must lose. Every small slight, a memo worded coldly, a meeting where their input is ignored, feels like an attack on the entire group. This perception of hostile, competitive intergroup relations hardens the resistance and makes compromise feel like betrayal. What we see in this example is a full-blown case of social identity salience and its consequences. The workers are not bad people. They are people whose group identity has been activated by a clear and present threat, and who are now thinking, feeling, and behaving in perfect alignment with the prototype of a loyal, wounded group defending its soul. But there is one more layer to explore. The self that is doing all this, the self that feels that collective pride that takes on the prototype as its own, where does that self come from in the first place? To answer that, we need to turn to a foundational thinker, George Herbert Mead. Part 2, The Self in Society. Mead's symbolic interactionism. Mead's core idea is deceptively simple but utterly profound. The self emerges and is continuously shaped through social interaction. We are not born with a self. We become ourselves through our relationships with others. And crucially, human interaction is symbolic. It relies on shared meanings, language, gestures, expressions that go far beyond the surface behavior. Think about it. A nod is not just a neck movement. It carries meaning, agreement, approval, understanding. A slammed door is not just wood hitting a frame. It is a symbol of anger or rejection. To exist in human society, we must constantly interpret these symbols, and we must be able to see ourselves through the eyes of others. Mead called this taking the role of the other. When we do this, we stop being just a private subject, what Mead called the I, the spontaneous, impulsive, unthinking part of us. We become a social object, the me. The me is the version of ourselves that we see reflected in the reactions of others. And through this process, by internalizing how we imagine others see us, we construct a self-concept that reflects the society we live in. We are, in Mead's terms, socially constituted. Now, before we go to examples, there is one crucial twist, and it comes from later research. Studies by Schrager and Scheinman in 1979 and by Tice in 1992 revealed a systematic distortion in this process. People do not actually see themselves as others see them. Instead, they see themselves as they think others see them. And that perception is often powerfully distorted by personal motivations and inaccurate communication. The mirror we look into is not a clean reflection. It is a mirror we have partly painted ourselves. Let's bring this to life with two vivid examples. Example 1. The teenager at the party performing coolness. 16-year-old Amir goes to a house party where he doesn't know many people. He's nervous. He desperately wants to fit in. So he begins to watch the popular group carefully. He notices what makes them laugh, how they stand, relaxed, almost bored, and the specific slang they use, words that signal insider status. Based on these observations, Amir forms a mental image of what a cool guy at this party looks like. And then he adjusts his own behavior. He laughs a little louder at the jokes they laugh at. He adopts a more detached, casual posture, even though inside he feels anxious. He drops one of those slang phrases he heard earlier, hoping it lands. In his head, he imagines that the other teens are now seeing him as confident and easygoing. He feels a small surge of pride. Let's use symbolic interactionism to decode what just happened. Shared symbols. The laughter, the posture, the slang, these are not random behaviors. They are symbols carrying shared meaning within that peer culture. A particular kind of laugh signifies, I'm in on the joke, I belong. The detached posture signifies, I am not trying too hard, I am naturally cool. The slang is a verbal badge of membership. Amir is not simply imitating the surface behavior like a parrot. He is interpreting the symbolic meaning behind it and then deploying those symbols himself. He is speaking the symbolic language of coolness, taking the role of the other. Here is the crucial inner move. Amir imaginatively steps into the perspective of the popular group. He sees himself through their imagined eyes. This external view, the me, becomes the object of his attention and shapes his conduct. His spontaneous, unthinking I, the raw impulse that wants to shrink into a corner, that feels nervous and out of place, is regulated and overridden by this socially constructed me that desperately wants to be seen as belonging. He performs the me that he believes will be accepted. The distorted perception. But here is what the research by Schrager and Scheinman and by Tice warns us about. Amir is not reacting to how the group actually sees him. He is reacting to how he thinks they see him. In reality, the popular kids may have barely noticed him. Perhaps one of them briefly thought, who's that guy trying a bit too hard? Or maybe they were too absorbed in their own conversations to form any impression at all. But because of Amir's own powerful motivation to be accepted, and because the party offers no clear, accurate feedback, he constructs a self-concept, I'm fitting in well, I seem cool, that may be entirely at odds with their actual impressions. His self is shaped not by a true reflection, but by a mirror he has partly painted himself. He walks away believing a story about his social success that might be fiction. Example 2. The junior employee who misreads her colleagues. Now let's move to the workplace. Priya has been at her new marketing job for 3 months. She is talented and creative, but she is new and she is acutely aware of it. In meetings, her boss often looks down at his laptop while she speaks. A senior colleague sometimes leaves the room abruptly, without explanation. Priya interprets these symbols through her own lens of insecurity. She believes that her boss's downward gaze means he finds her ideas boring. She believes that her colleague's sudden departures mean that her presence is irritating, that he can't stand to be in the same room. This imagined feedback begins to eat at her. She starts speaking less in meetings, avoiding eye contact. She internally defines herself as the weak link on the team. Then one day, after weeks of this quiet suffering, she confides in a trusted peer. And she is stunned to learn 2 things. First, her boss has actually been praising her work in private conversations. He looks down because he takes notes on everything and he thought her ideas were worth capturing. Second, the senior colleague has a medical condition that requires frequent, unscheduled breaks. Her colleagues actually saw her as promising, articulate, and a valuable new addition to the team. The entire edifice of her negative self-concept was built on a misreading. Let's use symbolic interactionism to understand Priya's experience. Shared symbols and role-taking. Priya actively interprets the boss's downward gaze and the colleague's abrupt exits as symbols. In her mind, they carry a clear meaning, disinterest and disrespect. She then takes the role of her colleagues. She imagines herself through their eyes, and what she sees is devastating. She constructs a self-view: I am inadequate, I am boring, I am the weak link, based entirely on that imagined perspective. That external, socially constituted me now dominates her workplace identity. Her spontaneous, curious I is silenced by a me that is certain of its own failure. The gap between perceived and actual views. This example directly mirrors the research finding. Priya does not see herself as her colleagues actually see her. She sees herself as she thinks they see her. That perception is powerfully distorted by her own personal motivation. She desperately wants to succeed and is terrified of failure, and by the highly ambiguous nature of the symbols she encounters. A boss looking at a laptop: is he bored or is he attentive? A colleague leaving the room: is it disgust or a medical need? The raw material is ambiguous, and Priya's insecurities shape that ambiguity into a coherent but false narrative. Her self-concept, though genuinely felt and deeply painful, has been constructed from a flawed reading of the social mirror. Part 3: What we take with us. So tonight we've journeyed from the boardroom of a hostile corporate takeover to the noisy chaos of a teenage party, to the quiet panic of a new employee in a meeting room. The thread that connects all these stories is a single transformative idea: the self is not a private island. It is a social construction, powerfully shaped by the groups we belong to and the interactions we navigate. When a social identity becomes salient, we don't just carry a label. We are depersonalized. We become living embodiments of a group prototype, thinking, feeling, and acting in its terms. And depending on the content of that prototype, the status we believe our group holds, and how we perceive the other group's intentions, that can lead to dignified resistance or to something much darker. And beneath all of this, the self itself is being continuously woven from the threads of symbolic interaction. We learn who we are by taking the role of the other, by seeing ourselves through the eyes of those around us. But we must never forget that the reflection we see is not always accurate. We see not what others actually see, but what we think they see, a perception colored by our fears, our hopes, and the stories we already believe about ourselves. So, what can we do with this knowledge? Let me leave you with 3 brief reflections. First, when you feel a group identity surge inside you, pause. Ask yourself, what is the prototype of this group telling me to think, feel, and do? Is it calling for courage or cruelty? For resistance or reconciliation? The content of the prototype is not fixed. It can be challenged and reshaped, but only if we see it clearly. Second, remember that the people you are in conflict with are not just prototypes. Depersonalization is an automatic process, but awareness can interrupt it. The faceless corporate machine contains individual human beings with their own fears and hopes. The other side is full of unique stories. Seeing that does not mean you abandon your group. It means you refuse to let your group identity blind you. Third, question the mirror. Like Amir and Priya, we all construct our self-concept based on how we imagine others see us. But that image is often distorted. Before you conclude that you are inadequate or unlikable or failing, seek out honest feedback. Ask. Clarify. You may find that the story your mind has spun is far harsher than the reality. The self is a magnificent collaborative work of art, built through symbols, relationships, and groups. But it is also a work we can revise. The more we understand how it is built, the more we can become thoughtful architects of who we are becoming. Thank you.